Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the entirety of the UFC 311 card. We're going to be breaking down every single fight from the early prelims all the way up until the main card, with the main event being Islam Makhachev versus Arman, the second version of this fight that initially took place back in 2019, the first ever fight of Arman's UFC career. But before we could get on into this amazing, exquisite breakdown, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, since this is my first video, you're definitely new to the channel, hit that subscribe button down below like it owes you some money while you're down there. Whether you are new to the channel or not, leave a like on today's video and let me know down below in the comment section, who do you have winning, Islam versus Arman, and what is your favorite fight on this card? For me, it is going to be Jiri versus Hill. That is my favorite fight. My main man, Jiri, hopefully gonna get that W, but we'll be talking about that a lot later, because we're gonna scroll on down here. This card is absolutely stacked, like its name was Sidney Thomas, and I am ecstatic to see how these fights end up playing out. But we're gonna begin at the bottom of the early prelims with Tagir Ulanbekov going up against Clayton Carpenter. Now, this is the first fight of the night, and in my opinion, we're going to keep things simple, right? Keep it simple, stupid. The KISS method, right? Tagir is the minus 325 favorite. Clayton Carpenter coming in at plus 260. Now, to me, anytime you see a dude that looks like Tagir on the early prelims, you already know what's about to happen. You already know that this dude is going to end up winning, especially when he goes up against a guy that looks like Clayton Carpenter, a guy who looks like if they went ahead and made High School Musical, but the MMA version, that's the guy that they would get to play as Troy Bolton, right? Now, obviously, that's not the full breakdown of the fight, right? You don't just look at two guys and determine who's gonna win, right? Sometimes we see these UFC fighters come in looking like a fat piece of shit, and they go in there and beat someone, right? Someone comes in with these washboard abs, and they get absolutely dog walked, right? We've seen it happen a gazillion times, so obviously you don't just base the fight off the look of the guys, right? On the feet, in my opinion, this fight can be won by Carpenter. Carpenter has the hands, but if you're looking at the actual statistics here, while Carpenter might have better hands, he technically has less reach compared to Carpenter, because he has a 70-inch reach and Carpenter has a 66-inch reach. Now, Tagir will, in my opinion, be able to bring this fight to the ground, and I do not believe that Carpenter has the tools to stop Tagir from potentially wrestle fucking him here late in this fight. Tagir is 4-1 in the UFC, which his only loss being to Tim Elliott. So sure, Carpenter has the undefeated record. Sure, he has multiple wins by submission, but I just think that Tagir will overpower him on the ground and eat the W like his name was famous Jameis Winston. Next up, we move to Ricky Turcios versus Benardo Sopaj. Now, this fight is very interesting if it took place a couple of months ago, right? Because Ricky Turcios was really talked up as this guy that's gonna go in and upset my main man, Chiwiwis, right? He was going to upset Raul Rosas, and people really were giving this guy the Sukalamink special, the Gawk Gawk 9000 special, and obviously that didn't end up working, right? Turcios was coming off of a layoff, whereas last fight before the Raul Rosas fight was back in 2022. Now, his nickname is Pretty Ricky, but in my opinion, that would kind of be the last word I would use to describe him. This isn't the best looking guy on earth. Nothing against him. If he watches this video, you know, nothing against you. If you actually watch this video and you comment, I'll go ahead and I'll cheer for you instead of who I'm actually going to pick, which is Benardo Sopaj. Now, in my opinion, this guy's fights, Ricky, he's kind of boring, right? All of his wins have been by decision. Now, Sopaj's UFC debut was his first fight in the UFC. No shit, that's why it's the debut, but that was his last fight. It was an L to Oliveira. Now, in my opinion, while we did end up seeing Sopaj get folded like a cheap suit in that fight by a flying knee, while that was an awesome highlight moment for Oliveira, if you actually remember watching that fight, right, and you didn't just see the clip on fucking Twitter or TikTok, and that's all you remember from the fight, it was actually Sopaj who was controlling the fight early on. He was the one that looked like he was going to maybe potentially put this into cruise control, right? Take it into the deep waters and win the fight. But ultimately, that didn't end up happening because he got put into a montage, right? That flying knee was beautiful by Oliveira. So, in my opinion, I don't really think that Sopaj is necessarily the best fighter I've ever seen, the most interesting fighter ever. To me, this pick is strictly just fading Turcios, who I honestly just don't think is going to be the correct match here for Sopaj. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick Sopaj here over Turcios. I think, again, this is much more of a fade Turcios pick over just kind of do tricks on the meat of Sopaj. So next up, we move to Rinya Nakamura going up against Gafurov. Now, this fight is very, very simple if you look at the stats. Now, obviously, we all know damn well that just because the stats point in one guy's direction, just because if you look through the win by, the significant strikes, the grappling, all this, everything will point towards Nakamura, right? The guy is a minus 500 favorite in this fight. We all know that just because you're a big favorite doesn't mean you might not randomly get kicked in the face by Leon Edwards. Doesn't mean you might not magically get heel hooked, right? Something crazy could end up happening. We know that, but taking things from a very basic level, it's very easy to figure out a path towards Nakamura winning. Nakamura has great takedown abilities, right? If you look at this, he has a 90% takedown accuracy and 100% takedown defense. Now, again, obviously, stats aren't all that matters. And on paper, Nakamura should win. So, in my opinion, if I don't think that Gafurov can take down Nakamura, why would I pick Gafurov? Right? If I believe this will be not the most exciting fight, if I think this might be a wrestle fest, I don't even really believe that Nakamura is gonna sub him, or if he's gonna be able to, get on top of him, mount on top of him, and lay down a bunch of punches and get Gafurov out of there. I don't think that's gonna happen. I think this is gonna kind of be one of the more boring fights, a fight that just ends up getting taken to the ground, and Nakamura kind of cruises his way to a decision victory, and ultimately that is how I think things will end up playing out on Saturday. Next up, we have Karol Rosa versus Ailin Perez. Now, most of you horny bastards in the chat, yes, I'm calling you guys horny because I think that's why everyone knows Ailin Perez, and that is because she shakes ass when she gets a W in the octagon, right? Now, personally, I wish that Mackenzie Dern would celebrate that way, but she doesn't. Maybe she's a little too classy for doing that. But Perez, when she wins, you're about to see some fucking ass shaking like no hands came on at the club. Right now, this is actually the only women's MMA fight on the card. So shout out to Dana for, you not having a million piss breaks to take during the card. But the reason this card being so stacked probably also is the reason why UFC 312, Strickland versus DDP, doesn't really look all that interesting. Now, again, just because a card is stacked doesn't mean it's always going to perform. But just because a card on paper looks like dog shit doesn't also mean that it's going to be terrible. But on paper, this is a great card. 312, not so much. Now, in my opinion, this does really feel like the kind of fight where you just don't pay attention to it, right? You go ahead, you go grab some Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the UFC, or you go and get some fucking Howler Head, or you go and get whatever the UFC throws at you a million times. Make sure you guys check out Craven the Hunter, or whatever the fuck they're gonna advertise during these fights, right? And, you know, just go ahead and miss this one. In my opinion, we have to actually talk about the fight, right? This isn't just the national piss break fight. Some people are going to watch this. I'm probably going to end up watching this, right? Perez is on a 4-win streak, right? She's running red hot. Rosa is 3-2 over the last 5. Now, in terms of looking at the numbers, in my opinion, when you look at the feet, you can clearly see that Rosa is the better, you know, striker. But I believe that Perez will be able to take things to the ground in which she'll be able to dominate. To me, if this fight goes to the ground, I believe that Perez will end up winning. Now, this is a fight where the odds, shockingly to me, I thought this would be more closer to not necessarily a pick'em, but maybe Perez plus 140, plus 150. The fact that it's plus 210 makes me maybe feel a little bit crazy for saying this, but honestly, I really do believe that Perez could end up submitting Rosa. I really do believe that as long as Perez is able to eat the punches on the feet, as long as she is able to kind of withstand the flurry that Rosa might send to her, that I do believe that Perez could end up winning. Now, out of all of the fights we are going to talk about today, this is probably the fight that I have the least amount of confidence in, right? If you were someone that bets on these fights like I do, I wouldn't go ahead and take out a second mortgage and place it on Perez, right? I wouldn't go ahead and say my confidence level is the highest. I'm not even going to bet a full unit on this fight, right? I might throw down half a unit, 1/4 of a unit on Perez. So ultimately, I will lean her way because she is the underdog, and typically, I will be honest, on the number card fights, and what I mean by that is the pay-per-views, right? UFC 311, UFC 300, 303, 304, 305, dale, right? Normally in the pay-per-view fights, it just seems like recently. Now, I don't have any numbers to back this up, so maybe this is just a foolish take, but it seems like the dogs are getting dog walked and the favorites just win every single fucking time. Now, not all the time are the favorites going to win, and to me, this feels like a fight that should be a little bit closer in the odds, so I am going to lean with Perez just due to the juice. Again, not by a large margin, though. Like, if you were like, Nick, I really think Karol Rosa is going to win, I'm not going to really argue with you down below in the comments. Now, final fight on the early prelims is going to be Zachary Reese's Puffs Peanut Butter Chocolate Flavor going up against my homie Azamat Bang Bang Skeet to Skeet. Shout out to Borat. Azamat Bekov going up against Zachary Reese. Now, this fight was supposed to be Reese versus Dumas, and obviously that didn't end up happening. We had a couple of pullouts on this fight card. Now, Azamat is coming off of a short notice fight, right? This is his first ever UFC fight, and it's coming on short notice. Now, just looking at the basic numbers here, Reese has a very, very, very large reach advantage, 77 inches to 73 inches. Now, I watched some of Azamat's fight clips, and I'm not going to sit here and say that I watched every single fight this motherfucker had, all 18, 19, 20, 21 fights. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I did all of that research for an early prelims fight, but I did watch some clips. I watched some of the fights, right? He did, in one of his most recent fights, that thing that Merab did to Cejudo, which is Merab, like, picked up Triple C and just, like, kind of walked with him. If you watch that fight, you know what I'm talking about. He picked him up, he walked with him like he was, like, a toddler, and then fucking slammed him down, right? And that was cool, right? I saw another clip where he hopped on a guy's back and just straight up choked him out, right? Dora backpack type of deal there, right? And I saw some other clips where he clearly has some power. So this guy seems, on paper, like a well-rounded fighter. Now, based on where he was fighting, are those UFC caliber guys? Maybe, maybe not. But I do think that if this was to go his way in an ideal scenario, I don't think he's going to go out there, right, and just starch Reese on the feet, right? I don't think he's going to go out there and knock Reese the fuck out. I don't think that's going to happen. I think his ideal win, his ideal path to victory is just getting on top of Reese, right? Keeping Reese on the ground and, maybe kind of just eking his way into a 2-1 victory decision, right? Now, Zachary Reese is actually the underdog in this fight, which to me is very shocking because, again, Makhachev is coming in, Azmat is coming in on short notice for his UFC debut. Now, Reese is only 2-1 in the UFC, right? This is not some UFC veteran with a lot of fights, right? And he earned his contract on the Dana White Contender Series back in 2023. Now, he is on a 2-fight win streak up against Medina, Marquez as well, with his sole loss being up against Cody Brundage, who's a guy that I like, even though no one thinks Cody Brundage is really all that great, right? Now, Reese, in my opinion, just loves spamming the submission button. I don't know how many of you guys play the UFC video game or have played the UFC video game in the past, but if you go online and you go up against someone that's playing as like Khabib, for instance, and you're like, you know what, let me play as McGregor, let me try to knock this guy out, and then he takes you to the ground, you have no idea how the fuck to wrestle. Let's wrestle, brother, right? You don't know how to wrestle, you don't know how to do anything because, maybe you just picked up the game, and you just get fucking, this guy spamming every submission in the book. Every single button you could possibly press, he's smashing you with. He's putting you in every single submission possible. And that is what Zachary Reese is going to do. He's going to spam the submission button. Now, I do think Reese also probably has better hands than Azamat. So I think, in my opinion, it seems pretty clear that Reese should win. Now, again, maybe I'm not thinking enough about this. Maybe this just seems too obvious, right? Short notice fight. Debut in the UFC against a guy that I think has good hands and good on the ground. Why would he lose? But then he's the dog, which makes it even more confusing because why the fuck is he the underdog? But I'm not going to think way too much about it because that's what the problem with just sports betting in general and just sports in general, right? Sometimes you really overthink things, right? You see it's like, oh, why is this guy the favorite? Whatever, I'm going to bet the underdog. And you're like, oh, there's a reason why he's the favorite. This, that, and the other thing. Blah, 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 blah. And you fucking talk yourself out of the pick that you were initially going to lean with. So I'm going to lean with Zachary Reese in this fight. Now, we move on into the prelims, the regular prelims, when more people are going to be dialed in, right? If you're watching the early prelims, you're a real UFC hardo, right? You're like me. Maybe you're a gambling addict. You just love the UFC. You're watching the early prelims. A lot of people, they aren't showing up to my house to watch these fights during the early prelims. Everyone kind of moseys on in during the prelims. Some people might mosey on during the main event, right? That's just how it goes, right? So we got Grant Dawson versus Diego Ferreira. Now, Grant Dawson, in my opinion, just from watching his fights in the past, he is the textbook definition of what you would imagine as a crotch sniffer, right? When people make fun of like, oh, this guy's a crotch sniffer, haha, that's what you would imagine Grant Dawson is, because that is literally what he does. This dude will wrestle you like it's his job, and frankly, it is, right? He's in the UFC, right? If he shot for 6 takedowns, 7 takedowns, I wouldn't even be remotely surprised. Now, Ferreira actually has pretty good takedown defense. So I do think that is going to be the deciding factor in this fight. It's not like Grant Dawson is going to go out there and fucking spark Ferreira, right? I would be shocked if that happened, right? He doesn't have some crazy hands, right? He doesn't have this crazy boxing. You're not going to get in there and Grant Dawson's going to turn fucking to a Spaniard like Ilia Topuria and spark Ferreira, right? He's not going to go in there, fucking Shama and knock your bitch ass out, right? He's not going to do that, right? He's not Poatan. He doesn't have these crazy hands, right? He is a wrestler. Let's wrestle, brother. Dagestan style, right? That's what he is, okay? So the deciding factor in this fight is going to be, can Ferreira be able to stop the takedowns? If Dawson's laying on top of him, If he wrestle fucks him, then guess what? Dawson's going to win. Now, we just saw Dawson, even with, kind of being like a wrestle fucker. What that basically means is like you lay on top of him, you do the do-si-do. You don't really do anything, you just kind of win, right? Get wrestle fucked, right? That's what I was kind of hoping my main man Kobe Covington would do to Leon Edwards, and that didn't end up happening. So we saw Dawson did actually technically kind of get dirty on the ground last time, right? He KO'd Garcia back in October. Ferreira's on a 2-win streak. He ended up beating Michael Johnson and Rebecca. Again, key to this fight, the key to the kingdom is, can Diego stop Grant from wrestling him? This, to me, feels like it may end up going the way of Grant Dawson snooze fest win. The type of fight where you're kind of checking your phone. You're like, oh, what's the weather like outside? You're checking on some stocks you're not invested in. You're scrolling through Twitter. You're looking at Instagram. You're like, oh, Gia Duddy dropped a new picture. I'll save that for later. That type of a deal, right? The type of a fight where you might want to actually talk to your girlfriend the whole time, right? And she thinks, hey, that's a good guy, right? He's not paying attention to the UFC fight, right? He cares about me, right? When in reality, you just don't give a fuck about the fight. It's boring, right? And, maybe now she'll give you the Sukala Mink special later. So even better, right? So this, to me, kind of feels like a boring fight. A decision win by Grant Dawson. But we have been kind of picking the way of the underdogs. I'm feeling another underdog upset. The fact that Diego is 40 years old does concern me, but I do think he's going to stuff enough takedowns and maybe not knock out Grant Dawson, but be able to win the fight on his feet, right? Maybe even just a narrow split decision victory where he's able to stuff enough takedowns and it ends up going his way. Smart part of me says, Nick, it's obviously Grant Dawson, but, you've ever seen Spider-Man where the Green Goblin and the mask is talking to him? The mask is telling me to go Diego, and that is the way we are going. Next up, we got, oh, shit, I did not mean to click on that. That is obviously not going to go ahead and work. We are going to go ahead and move on over to Bogdan Guskov versus Billy Alicana. Now, this fight, the reason why that didn't work is because you actually can't expand this fight for some reason. It doesn't actually let you see the information on these fighters. But that's okay, because I wrote it all down, right? We have Google here. We don't need some exclusive graphic, some amazing graphic for you guys. So, not in my opinion, this fight was supposed to be Johnny Walker versus Guskov. Now, I am a Johnny Walker enthusiast. He might be the funniest guy to watch in the UFC. He has so many fights where he just gets knocked out, and it's like a ragdoll fashion. If you've ever played like Saints Row and you do like the ragdoll mode where you get like hit by a car and you go flying, you go flopping around, right? That's just how Johnny Walker gets knocked out. It's hilarious. He seems like a funny guy. I've watched some of his clips on Twitter. He seems like a nice guy, and I'm kind of sad that he's not fighting. Kind of sad that he's not fighting, because while I don't think he was going to beat Guskov, I think he was probably going to get, again, knocked out in Looney Tunes fashion. I think it would have been fun to watch. But instead, we get Billy Alicana. Now, I am not going to sit here, again, and pretend like I've seen every single one of this guy's fights, right? He fought in Fierce FC, the LFA, and even in PFL. Now, he does have a 7-1 record, but nothing I saw when watching this guy fight told me that this is going to be a guy that goes in there and in the light heavyweight division lights up Guskov like a Christmas tree. I really do not see that coming, and I think coming in on a 1-week notice, first ever UFC fight, again, I'm just going to fade that. I'm just going to fade that. Now, the odds on here are just wrong. I believe this might have been for Walker versus Guskov. Even then, I think Guskov should have been the favorite over Walker, but I think I checked that, so I don't know. Guskov is actually minus 310 on DraftKings. 2-1 in the UFC, back-to-back KO wins. Now, I don't think Guskov is like, he's going to go in there and become like champion. I just don't see him becoming the light heavyweight champion. but or like being this unbeatable guy, unstoppable guy. But he has back-to-back KO wins, and I think he leaves the octagon with Billy's head on a spike. So I'm going to go ahead and lean with Guskov there. Next up, we move to Jailton Almeida going up against Sergey Spivak. Now, this fight is interesting in my opinion. Now, this might not be the casual fight, right? Like, if you're watching with your buddies, they might be like, what the fuck am I watching? What is Almeida doing? Because I am a fan of Derek Lewis, and what Almeida did to Derek Lewis was so disgusting. Couldn't even finish him. Pause. But, like, I don't think he's the most exciting fighter ever. But I do believe, spoiler alert, he is going to end up winning this fight. Now, of 8 UFC fights, Almeida only has 1 loss, and that is to Curtis Blades. He, for some reason, again, he really couldn't finish Derek Lewis. It really didn't make any sense. It was a fight back in 2023. I'm a Derek Lewis guy, the Black Beast. Shout out Derek Lewis. I always root for him. And Almeida kind of just laid on top of him the same way that Brock Lesnar lays on top of his wife, right? And his most recent win was a submission on Romanov. Every fight besides the Derek Lewis fight ended in a finish, even when he ended up getting smacked up by Curtis Blades. So I do feel pretty confident in Jailton here. Now, again, is he the most exciting fighter? Fuck no, baby. And again, you know, some of your more casual friends, if you're watching this with them, they might not understand what's happening. They might not enjoy this fight, but in my opinion, I do think that Jailton has the ability to finish this with his hands. I believe he has the ability to finish this by submission. So I do like him here. Now, Spivak's biggest advantage here would be just sparking him, knocking him out cold, right? If the fight stays on the feet, that is obviously where you would give the edge to Spivak. Now, again, does that mean that Almeida's not good on the feet? No, he is. But that's where the advantage lies, right? Here, the grappling does really point towards Jailton Almeida. Now, in my opinion, I think I know why Jailton is the favorite. It's because I think this is going to be a fight where he kind of just cruises his way to a 3-round victory, right? Where it goes to decision. Maybe he wins 2-1. Maybe early, Spivak's able to get to him. Maybe this seems like, oh shit, Jailton's on his back foot, and then eventually, like, the second round starts and he just has him on the ground for a while, right? That's what this does kind of feel like. Now, I do think that Spivak is closer to a Cyril Gane compared to the other guys that Almeida has fought previously. So I don't think this is necessarily like a cakewalk, mortal lock of the century, you know, sell your left testicle to be able to bet on Jailton, but I do think he will be able to win. And honestly, I do think it's not going to go to decision. I think we are going to end up seeing Jailton end up subbing him inside of the second round. The final fight on the prelims is going to be Payton Talbott going up against Raoni Barcelos. Now, Talbott is the fighter that everyone that likes the UFC is just taking their turn, fucking playing with this guy's nuts like it's a fushigi, right? Everyone and their mother is doing tricks on this guy, right? They're talking him up, right? And this is the scenario where people will buy into Barcelos is going to fraud check him. That's like a famous UFC, in my opinion, MMA, I guess boxing, you know, there's just a fighting narrative, the fraud check. You don't really hear it, in my opinion. Like, I'm a big NFL guy. I love fantasy football. Subscribe on YouTube, Notorious Fantasy, if you play fantasy football. I love the NFL. But no one really says, like, oh, this is a fraud check game, right? The Chiefs versus the Bills. The Chiefs will beat them, fraud check of the Bills, right? No one really says that. But in the UFC, there's a lot of fraud checking. Remember Ricky Turcios? Oh, he's going to fraud check. He's going to beat Raul Rosas. Chee-wee-wees, right? He's going to beat him, right? We kind of hear the fraud check. And maybe there's some people that view Talbot as a bit fugazi, awazi-awoozi, fugazi, you know? Maybe he's not that guy, pal. But I think he is. Right? I really do think he is the real deal. And sure, ever since getting in the UFC, he's not fighting the best talent the bantamweight division has to offer. But I also don't think Barcelos is like the best of the best, the top of the charts back in your hearts, right? The top of the mountain Kilimanjaro type of guy, right? I just don't think he is. So if you count the contender series, Talbott has 3 straight finishes, 2 by KO, 1 by sub, and only 1 decision total over 9 fights, right? He is very, 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 very good on the feet. And his takedown defense has looked good. The path for Barcelos here, technically, I think, would be to take him down. But I really just don't think that's going to end up happening. Raoni has been in the UFC since 2018, and he recently has just been ice cold, right? Just 2 wins over his last 6 fights, with his most recent win coming over Christian Quiones, who lost his fight prior to that. And while the guy's nickname is Problema, I don't really think he's going to cause much of a problema to Mr. Payton Talbott. Again, I don't think this is a fraud checking. I think Talbott wins this by any way he wants. Hopefully like a nice spinning back fist in the early rounds. I do think that Barcelos is going to get cute. He's going to be like, let's box. Let's box. Fucking point to the ground. Max Holloway, Gaethje style, right? And he's just going to end up getting fucked up, right? I think that he's going to end up facing the same exact fate that he faced when he fought Umar before. And what happened when Umar fought him? Got knocked the fuck out. So now we move to the main card, beginning with Kevin Holland versus RDR. Now, I am someone that I like watching videos on the UFC. I'm a UFC enthusiast. I like watching or just reading stuff on Twitter. And there's a lot of people comparing RDR to DDP, right? The 3-name thing, right? DDP, Dricus du Plessis, Renato, right? Both guys with the 3s, right? Both a little awkward. I don't necessarily see it, but maybe I'm just blind, right? Maybe I'll see it up against Kevin Holland. Now, Kevin Holland, I used to like Kevin Holland. I did. I thought he was interesting. Recently, to me, I kind of feel like Kevin Holland's stock went from not necessarily the highest, right? No one was talking about Kevin Holland in a crazy way, at least in my opinion. Like, no one I know was talking up Kevin Holland. No one was sucking off Kevin Holland, but people liked him, right? He was a fun fight. He lost his last fight to Delitse at UFC 307, a fight which he suffered a rib injury that ultimately ended up being kind of the straw that broke the camel's back there, right? Now, he is 2-3 in his last 5 fights. And again, like, at times, this is a guy that was fun to watch. But in my opinion, Kevin Holland kind of, we've heard in the past, Charles Oliveira is a quitter. Du Bronx is a quitter. We've heard it about some UFC fighters. Holland kind of is a quitter. Kind of is. He kind of waves the white flag. Now, he doesn't give up necessarily, but you can kind of just see when you're watching the fights, hey, it seems like he's given up, right? He has that quit in him. Some guys in the UFC, they've got that dog in them. Some fighters have that crazy in them. They're a little bit loco. They're a little crazy. And, Kevin Holland just kind of has that quit in him. Now, again, the quit isn't going to be like, oh, I give up, throw in the fucking towel. It's going to be like, oh, I lost round 1, I lost round 2, and round 3, we're just going to fucking emote like it's Fortnite, right? We're just going to diddle around, dilly-dally around. I used to like Kevin Holland. I really, really, really think the fact that this right now, the odds right now are -110, -110. -110. This is a pick'em. How in the actual fuck is this a pick'em? Now, look, I get RDR isn't going to go in there and knock Kevin Holland out. I get he's not going to go in there and fucking do a 360 no-scope kick to the temple and knock him out there. And look, I get De Ridder didn't have the most impressive UFC debut, right? He fought Gerald Meerschaert back in November, and he won by submission in round 3. It wasn't like the most impressive fight. It wasn't like, in my opinion, from what I remember, it wasn't like 50 Shades of Grey domination, but it was good. He's a good grappler, right? And he's a former 2, I threw up the 3, he's former 2-1 championship division winner. He had 2 belts. The double champ does what the fuck he wants, middleweight and light heavyweight. Now, I know Holland could knock him out. So I'm not going to pretend like that's an impossibility. Right? And Holland's talking about how he wants to fight 6 times this year. You know what? Respect to Holland for that. That's cool. I like guys that fight a lot. I don't really find myself being the biggest fan of guys where it's like they fight once or twice a year. Like, it's just not as exciting. Obviously, that's what most guys do, right? I find myself more attracted, to the fighters that are fighting a bunch in a given year. Because you get to see them more. It's more exciting. Holland, respect to him, you fight 6 times, you quit in fucking 4 of them, right? I don't expect him to win a lot of those fights if he fights 6 times. And I don't expect him to beat RDR. Now, Kevin Holland is more known to the public, right? If I was to ask my friends aren't fucking watching fight nights, they're not watching every single UFC card. They watch the big name cards, right? UFC 300, the one in the Sphere, 303. Me and my boys for my bachelor party, we went to Vegas. We got to see the press conference. We were there. UFC 303, Pereira versus Jiri, the samurai. I was really excited to go see my boy Connor, but Pereira is, in reality, Pereira's my favorite fighter at this point because Connor just never fights. So I've been a big fan of Pereira for a long time. That was awesome to see, right? My friends, they were dialed in for that. They're not the most plugged into every single fighter, right? So if you ask your friends, or maybe you don't know anyone that watches the UFC, but if you know people that watch the UFC, they know Kevin Holland. They do. Everyone knows Kevin Holland. He might not be the most household name. Not everyone remembers his last fight, right? They don't remember his ribs getting all fucked up, but they probably remember seeing him fight before. They've probably never seen RDR fight before, right? So a lot of the casual money is going to go in on Kevin Holland. I think that this fight could end up being favorited in the way of Kevin Holland by the time that these two touch the gloves, the sound of the octagon on Saturday, which is going to be great for RDR bettors, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait a little bit. I'm going RDR. I think he wins this in 2 rounds to 1 decision, or he subs him in the 3rd round. Again, the knockout potential is there for Holland. I just don't see it happening. I do not see it happening. I'm easily going with RDR. Next up, we got my boy Moicano, baby. My main man. He just needs some fucking money, man. He just does. I wish I could do his accent better. I wish I could repeat one of his post-game, post-fight speeches. The guy's electric on the mic. Super enjoyable watch. Minus 180. Benil Dariush plus 150. Now, shockingly, these guys are both the exact same age. And Moicano said he's going to knock this old man out. I think Moicano is younger than him by 10 years. Not 10 years. 10 days. He's only 10 days younger than him. Dariush looks old. Yeah, honestly, the fact that he's 35 seems fugazi. Seems like you ever seen one of those baseball players where Juan Soto, right? Juan Soto is X age, right? He's now in my Mets. But he's probably 4 years older than that, right? I don't know how many of you guys watch baseball. Some of these guys, their ages will say this, and they're not actually that old. They're much older. Interesting. Dariush, man, I've always kind of been a Dariush guy. I think Dariush is an interesting fighter. I'm trying to remember the fight where he was losing and he just fucking sparked the guy. I'm trying to think just off the top of my head. I can't remember the name of the fighter. But Dariush is an interesting guy. He has great abilities with his hands, right? He could definitely get lucky, up all night to get lucky, Robin Thicke, right, and knock out Money Moicano, right? It's possible. It is possible. But the Dariush now that has now lost back-to-back fights by sleepy time, go to sleep, back-to-back fights lost by KO. His most recent fight, Arman flatlined him, and the fight before that, it was Charles Dubronx. Now, his last fight was back in December of 2023, which feels like ages ago at this point. January 2025. So, bit of the rust, the fact that he's gotten sparked 2 times in a row. I think the smart move is to go with the favorite, Moicano, right? Now, Dariush has been in the UFC for over 10 years at this point, and again, I do think he has some decent wins on his resume, but when push comes to shove, again, he's got knocked out 2 times in a row. Now, Moicano isn't necessarily when you think of him, you're not thinking okay, he's going to go in here and fucking wipe the floor with Dariush in 1 round, right? He's going to dog walk him like a dog. He's going to pat him on his head and say, good job, buddy. I just knocked you the fuck out, right? I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. But Moicano is right now, he's running hotter than Derek Lewis's balls, right? After he knocked out Volkov, right? 4 straight wins, 3 by finish. Now, in my opinion, that Jalen Turner fight back at UFC 300 was definitely a little bit fugazi because Jalen Turner completely choked the win away. He should have won that fight, but he went for like the walk-off KO, right? Like the cool guys don't look at explosions, the fucking where like Stephen Curry shoots a 3, turns around, sleepy time, right? And that's what he tried to do, but obviously that didn't end up working, and Moicano ended up winning that fight. He just beat the ever-living shit out of Benoit Saint-Denis in France. And while I don't think Moicano's going to end up getting the finish, I do think he's going to strongly win by decision. And I really don't think that Dariush will be able to like just keep him on the ground. So I think Moicano's going to end up winning that. Next up, we got my fight of the night. Jamahal Hill going up against Jiri Prochazka. Now, I've already stated that I'm a big fan of Pereira. I have a bunch of shirts that say Shama on them. I just love the guy. I'm glad he gets my money. You have it. Jiri is also one of my favorite fighters. Now, Jiri is like kryptonite is Pereira. Guys can block. Guys that, fucking are able to, keep their hands up, be able to move through things, right? A guy like Pereira's got some great blocking, right? Jiri, he eats those leg kicks for breakfast. His leg was compromised badly in the last fight, right? Jiri's kind of weird because he doesn't really have necessarily the best blocking technique either. He just kind of eats punches for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He just does, or a kick straight to the face doesn't even faze him. Now, he's been 4-2 ever since entering the UFC in 2020, if you don't know anything about him. He has wins over Volkan, Ozdemir, Dominic Reyes, the Sweet Prince, Glover Teixeira, and Alexander Rakic, which is his most recent win because the fight after that he lost to Payton. 2 losses are against Alex. Now, every single one of his fights has ended in finish, whether he's won or not. His longest fight went to round 5 with a sub up against Glover back in 2022. Now, both Jamahal and Jiri have fought Glover. Jamahal beat the shit out of Glover, whereas Jiri's fight was a little bit closer. Jiri, again, is a very weird fighter. Not this prototypical, like, when you imagine a UFC fighter, you're not going to imagine a guy that fights like Jiri. You're just not going. In my opinion, you're just not going to. Right? You also don't imagine the training of Jiri. Jiri's like the Aaron Rodgers of the UFC, right? He's going to do like darkness retreats. You see, like, 1 second he's on top of a mountain. The next second he's learning karate. The next moment he's fucking running backwards on a treadmill through a house that doesn't even look like it's the correct height for him. Like, he's tall as fuck. And he doesn't have like the correct thing for him. Now, both of these guys are coming off of losses to Pereira, and Jiri, in my opinion, has a great chin. Nick, he got knocked out by Pereira twice. That means his chin is gone. I don't think so. I don't think his chin's gone. I think he's got that great chin. He's got the crimson chin. Now, Jamahal, if you're counting the Contender Series, is 7-2 at the UFC level, 6-2 if you don't count the Contender Series. Now, this guy was stripped of his belt following his win versus Glover to get the belt back in 2023 due to him tearing his Achilles playing basketball, which is just terrible. Like, I don't like Jamahal Hill at all. Like, I think he's a very unlikable guy. The way he talks about it being like a fluke win against Pereira, the way he's built like fucking Juice WRLD in the, have you ever seen the Bandit music video where he's like the lean gut? That's what Jamahal Hill looks like. Jamahal Hill fucking pisses me off. Just everything about it. The way he talks, he fucking pisses me off. Now, obviously, Nick, Jamahal Hill would beat the fuck out of you. I know. Right? I'm not planning to go into the octagon and beating the fuck out of Jamahal Hill, right? Obviously, he would starch me, right? He's 6'4". He's big, right? I'm 5'10", like 170. If I eat too much, I might end up having some man boobies. So, obviously he has the lead over me fight, right? But I just don't like him. He just seems so fucking annoying. And I think a lot of people dislike him. And I think that Jiri's going to beat him. Why? Because Jamahal Hill doesn't fight with the high guard. He doesn't keep his hands up. He's going to keep his hands low, and he's going to get sparked. And we've said sparked like a million times. I think he's going to be wide open to get smacked by Jiri. Now, again, Jamahal Hill has fucking crazy power. Hill has crazy power, so I get why he's favored. He's minus 125, but I'm taking the underdog. I'm taking Jiri, and I'm hoping Jiri sends his cocky ass to the Shadow Realm. Next up, we move to the co-main event of the evening. Merab Dvalishvili. Merab. What's funny is you guys are probably like, Nick, you're such a casual. You don't know how to pronounce everyone's name. You ever listen to Chael P. Sonnen before? Or honestly, if you guys know who I am, like if you're just watching this because like I posted a link to this like on Twitter, or you know who I am like from my fantasy football videos, I can't pronounce anyone's name in the NFL. Like I know these guys, I can't pronounce their fucking names. Devon Achan, shout out to him. All right, so Merab versus Umar Nurmagomedov. Now Merab, if you didn't know who Merab was, I bet you do now, because even if you never saw him fight before, you probably saw the fight in the Sphere, right? Everyone watched that shit. Him versus Sugar Sean O'Malley. Now, he started off his UFC career 0-2, and he has not dropped a fight since then. He's actually ripped off 11 straight wins with only one finish, which was back in 2021 against Marlon Moraes. Now, when you hear that, you might think, oh, Merab's a snooze fest. Merab is boring. Merab is not fun. He actually is fun to watch. Sure, he probably is not going to finish yet, pause, but he's fun to watch. He's got a great gas tank and is fine on the feet, and he's got great grappling, great wrestling. He's an exciting guy to watch, even if he doesn't have that finishing power. Now, when you think of the name Nurmagomedov, you're thinking of Khabib. Thinking about Les Wrestle. Thinking about get you on the ground, wrestle fuck you. You're thinking of crazy subs. You're thinking of when he beat Conor. You're thinking of things like that, right? Now, Khabib's cousin might share the name of Khabib, and while Khabib does train him, they're not necessarily the same exact fighter, right? Khabib will maul you into the dirt, take you into the deep waters, and you'll be sleeping with the fishes like your name was Luca Brasi, right? Umar, on the other hand, can stand up and piece you apart, right? He's not just looking for the takedown, looking for the crotch sniff. He can stand and bang, knock you out, spark you out. Plus, he has that great ground game. Now, Umar is a big favorite. He's minus 305. Merab from Georgia, plus 245. And we're talking about Hotlanta, Georgia, baby. We're talking about Georgia, the country. Now, this fight, to me, I thought the odds would be a little bit closer. Now, I believe that Umar should be favored. So I don't think it should be in favor of the guy with the belt. I think it's going to be Anu. I think Umar's going to win. But I think there is a argument to be made that maybe this shouldn't be minus 305. Maybe this should be closer odds that really, maybe it should be like minus 200, right? Not minus 305. Dale, shout out Pitbull, right? Now, again, Umar is the favorite because he's coming off of a very dominant win up against Corey Sandhagen, whereas Merab is coming off a fight up against Sean O'Malley where sure he won, but while a lot of people like to think that was like the most dominant victory ever, if you actually watch the fight again, now a lot of people, they just watch the fight once, they say, you know what, that's how I remember it. Now, as a fan of Sugar Sean, I was pissed with how he fought. I thought Sugar Sean should have been more aggressive, and I think Sugar Sean should have went for the finish when he fucking hit Merab in the midsection, and Merab, he folded. I thought he should have went for the kill. He really didn't, which is weird. And I don't think Merab dominated as much as you might think he did. Now, again, he definitely won. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, Sugar Sean won. Wah, right? Like some people will do. Their favorite fighter lost. It's rigged, right? Now, sometimes, the fight does kind of feel a little bit rigged, a little fugaz. But I didn't think that was like a rigged fight. I thought that was a, fair win for Merab. But I don't think it was as dominant as what we just saw Umar do. Now, Umar is currently undefeated at the UFC level and is undefeated overall in mixed martial arts. Now, since entering the UFC, he's 6 fight win streak and 3 wins coming by finish. There's gonna be people that are like, "Oh, it's just because he's from, he's a Khabib, he's a Nurmagomedov, this, that, and the other thing," right? That's what people say. He's got that fucking Nurmagomedov privilege, right? The Dana White privilege, right? Man, I think there's a reason why he's getting this title fight, and I think he's gonna beat Merab. I think Umar's gonna be able to push the pace in the octagon. And I don't think he's going to fight nervous like Sean did. I really don't. I think he's not going to back down. I think he's going to push the fight towards Merab and knock him the fuck out. I got Umar by finish in the 3rd round. Maybe it'll be a sub. Could be a sub. Could be. I just said finish. I didn't say knockout. And again, I like Merab. But I think Umar gets the finish here. And again, the price is kind of gross. I have Made a bunch of parlays. We're going to be talking about some bets that I like at the end. But yeah, we're going with Merab taking the L and new Umar Nurmagomedov. Final fight here. The main event of the evening. Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan. I really don't think I said his last name right. I saw a video of Arman with Nina. Now, there's a lot of UFC fans that like hate Nina, this, that, and the other thing. But dude, Arman was trying to he was trying to fuck Nina. You could clearly tell. It was kind of funny to watch, but we won't talk about that too much. We got Islam versus Arman. Now, this is a rematch, you know, for anyone newer to the UFC, which is okay. You know, you don't have, this could be the first time you ever fucking watch. That's great. You know, I'm not there's a lot of people that like gatekeep the UFC, like, oh, your first card was UFC 300, you fucking casual, right? I'm not like that. You know, I'm glad people like the UFC. UFC is awesome. Like I love the UFC, but obviously, right, I wouldn't be making videos if I didn't like it. So this is a rematch. You know, the first fight took place back in 2019 in Russia, where Islam won 30-27 on 2 judges' cards and 29-28 in the other judges' cards. The fight was only 3 rounds, which is different than this one because it's 5 rounds, and was the first UFC fight of Arman's career. Now, a lot has changed since then, right? Arman is much better than we saw him in that first fight, and he fought very well in that first fight, considering it was his first fight, right? And so is Islam, though. Islam has also gotten better. And the fact that this is a 5-round fight could push Arman to have better performance. The first fight, we saw a ton of grappling. Real chess match of sorts, right? That favored Islam. This time, though, I think they're going to be more likely to stand and bang, right? While they're both great grapplers, I feel like we've seen Islam really transcend his boxing ability, his fighting ability, and I think this is going to be a fight that is not as on the ground as you might think. On paper, this looks like a grappling match. This looks like, oh, you predict what happened in the first fight. You watch the first fight, you're like, that makes sense, that's going to happen again. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think this is going to be very different to the first fight, and it's going to be more of a stand-up fight. Now, Islam is as dominant as they get, right? Islam is on fire. He's amazing. He's been fighting so well ever since becoming champion in Abu Dhabi back in 2022. That fight was up against Charles do Bronx Oliveira for the vacant title. Ever since then, he won a decision against Volk, which I still think Volk should have won that fight, but it is what it is. He knocked out my main man Volk, which hurt. On short notice, which really hurt. He sent him to the Shadow Realm, sent him to Azkaban. And then he beat Poirier in a fight that was closer than I thought it would be. Arman, on the other hand, he's on a 4-fight win streak. His most recent W was up against Oliveira at UFC 300, a split decision. I honestly thought Charles was going to win that fight. And then Arman slipped his pants off, his shorts off, like he was at a Diddy party. And he was all oiled up, and he got out of there. Respect to him. He got the W, right? I thought Oliveira was going to sub him. I was wearing my Charles do Bronx shirt. I was so happy. I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to get that win. And then we don't get the win, right? Arman ends up winning. Respect to Arman, though. I think a lot of people are going to hop on the Arman bandwagon, right? A lot of people are going to see, they saw that picture of him training, right? Where he just looks jacked beyond belief. He looks like he was created in a lab, right? And people are going to take that, be like, wow, he's beating Islam. And then they're not only going to take that, they're just going to be like, I fucking don't like Makhachev at all. That's what a lot of people don't like him. And they want to see him go down, 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 down. So they're going to root against him, which is fair. But, and this is a big but, shout out to Lisa Ann, I don't think this is going to be the wrestling battle that we think it's going to be. I think both guys will struggle to get a clear advantage on the ground. And if there was an advantage, it would lean Islam. I think this is more of a stand-up fight. And I think that Makhachev is incredibly underrated on the feet. And I think Makhachev will win 5-round decision. I don't think this is going to be a dominant showing from Islam. I don't think this is going to be like a straight-up fucking 4-1 domination, right? I think this is going to be a closer fight. The odds are interesting. -380 for Islam, plus 300 for Arman. I am definitely going to go ahead and lean with Islam. Now, I've bet against Islam, Makhachev, multiple times. You know what? I fucking hate. I don't like this guy. I can't stand him. Volk's beating him, and then Volk, I thought beat him, but he didn't. I'm like, you know what? Short notice. Volk, he's got this. Volk is in Valhalla, right? And I'm like, okay. Dustin Poirier. I don't really like Dustin Poirier, so I was like, you know what? Islam's winning that one, and he did. I've lost money betting against Islam before. Not going to make that foolish mistake again. Islam by decision. Now, in terms of betting, I'm not going to talk about every single thing that I have bet, but one of my favorite parlays right now is Islam. It's going to be Umar, and it's going to be Payton Talbott parlay. It's going to be around minus 130. Some other bets that I really like De Ridder at minus 110. And if you want to parlay him, you can get Money Moicano up in terms of odds on that as well. And I'm betting on Jiri as well. I'm going to probably lay the hammer down on Jiri because I really do think Jiri's going to beat Jamahal Hill. I do like Jailton a lot. I do think he's a pretty solid bet. And then I do like Reese because, again, he's the underdog. And I'm definitely not betting any money on fucking Ricky Turcios. So thank you guys all so much for watching. Let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think about this UFC card. Do you think it is as stacked as I believe it's going to be? Do you think it's going to live up to its hype? Or do you think it'll be underwhelming? Because a lot of the times, everyone gets down on their knees, talks up a card. Sometimes it doesn't end up living up to the hype. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know who you guys think is winning the main event and the co-main event. I love you guys more than you will ever know. Hit that subscribe button because you are new. This is the first ever video. Thank you guys for watching. I love you guys. Have a good one. Goodbye.